Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at the third album by Cannibal Corpse, Tomb of the Mutilated. Now before we begin, just some background history on this album. This is the final album with the original Cannibal Corpse lineup. We'll get into why in a bit. And aside from just being another solid album from this band, it's also a very important album when it comes to the history of death metal. So let's get into it. Now first of all, this album is very important because it contains the song Hammer Smashed Face, which is the band's most commercially successful and most iconic song to date. While the album was released in 1992, it wasn't until 1994 that Hammer Smashed Face served its true purpose. In that year, Jim Carrey starred in a movie called Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, and Jim Carrey, being a Cannibal Corpse fan, was in a scene that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, where Cannibal Corpse are on stage and Ace Ventura happens to show up and he does that little dance. This scene created a larger awareness of death metal as a whole, but when it comes to the early 90s in general, any death metal band that had released an album around that time had significantly high album sales. In fact, Cannibal Corpse released their fourth album that year, The Bleeding, and it sold around 88,000 copies, if I'm correct. Aside from all of that, the actual song, it's everything you'd want from Cannibal Corpse. You know, it has perfect guitar work, riffs, solos, bass, vocals, lyrics, pretty much everything. Oh, and don't forget the tempo changes. The song also featured in a scene from David Ayer's Netflix movie, Bright, in a scene where Joel Edgerton's character describes it as the greatest love song ever written. And it's still a live staple in the band's tours today. And even though Chris Barnes was replaced by George Corpse Grinder Fisher, even he could sing that song perfectly. It's just as fun to listen to now at their shows as it was back then. Now, if I had to describe the production on this album, it's essentially Butchered at Birth done better. It's less murky and it's more sophisticated. Alex Webster's bass is much thicker than it was on Butchered at Birth. Chris Barnes sticks to the same low grunting vocals and it's fantastic as always. Paul's drumming is a little less crunchy and a little less raw sounding compared to what he's done on their first two albums. Now, when it comes to the guitar work, I will mention that while the guitar riffs and solos were some of the best in the Chris Barnes era of Cannibal Corpse, this is unfortunately the final album with Bob Rosé because he was fired from the band after this album. I'm not sure why exactly, but yeah, that happened. He even disappeared from the industry and became a golf instructor, though I'm not sure what he's doing right now as we speak. Thematically, this album was kind of conceived as a concept album involving necrophilia and sadism, themes that you'll get used to on their later albums. There's even an excerpt from a confession tape from a real-life serial killer at the beginning of the song. Yeah, I'm not gonna mention the rest of that title. And speaking of which, the song titles and the album cover are all quite extreme. This is the original version. I had to censor some of it out. And this is the censored version. It's because of artwork like this that the band was unable to perform some of the material in Germany at that time. Now, even though I enjoyed this album, it does become a little bit monotonous after a while, a little bit samey feeling, and a little bit repetitive. And the second half just isn't as good as the first half. There are 9 tracks to be exact, so there isn't a lot. My favorite track is, of course, Hammer Smashed Face, and my least favorite will probably be Beyond the Cemetery. I can't even remember that song, to be honest. So yeah, that was my review of Tomb of the Mutilated. Next time we're going to be looking at the fourth and final album in the Chris Barnes era of Cannibal Corpse, and that's The Bleeding. So thank you all for watching. Please be sure to like the video, share it and subscribe, and hit the notification icon. Be safe during this time, and I'll see you soon.